Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dianti Tomia. My student ID number is N1D221036. I'm the leader of the group 5 from class A.
My name is Resky Pratama. My student number N1D221016.
My name is Abil Syurahbil Darwin.
My name is Fandra Handayani. My register number is N1D221007.
I'm Rahmawati.s with student ID number N1D221027.
In this opportunity, my friends and I will give an explanation about French philosophical fiction. Here is the explanation. Candide, from Francois Marie Araud or Voltaire. The plot of Candide is colorful and intricate. Candide, the illegitimate nephew of a German baron, is raised in the baron's castle under the instruction of the scholar Dr. Pangloss, who teaches that this world is the best of all possible worlds. Expelled from the castle by the baron after falling in love with the baron's young daughter, the knave Candide subsequently undergoes numerous misadventures and misfortunes. These include conspiration into the army of the Bulgars, where he is flogged for desertion and witnesses harrowing battles, a journey to Lisbon with Pangloss to find the city leveled by an earthquake and under the control of the Equations, where Pangloss is hanged as a heretic and Candide is flogged for his acceptance of Pangloss' philosophy. A voyage to South America, where he narrowly avoids being eaten by cannibals, patching up in El Dorado, a utopia free of crime and religious conflict whose inhabitants place no value to gold and jewels scattered throughout its streets, and where Candide acquires a fortune. In the end, Candide and his friends, including Dr. Pangloss, who has providentially survived his hanging, take to living a simple rustic life, cultivating their own garden. Candide is a stinging satire in which Voltaire takes at a number of philosophical, social, political, and religious targets. Another of Voltaire's targets is Candide is organized religions.
I will tell two novels. First, Le Peu de Sargent by Honor de Balzac. The central theme of Le Peu de Sargent is the dilemma that each of us may have to face, whether to live for the moment, pursuing one's desires, with all the attendant risks, or to curb one's passion and opt for a sober, sheltered existence. The final decades of the 19th century saw the emergence in French literature of erection to realism, symbolism, where the focus was on the subjective and the objects of the external world were treated not as things in themselves but as symbols for the evocation of mood. From a philosophical standpoint, if realism corresponds to materialism, the symbolism can be seen as a kind of literary version of subjective idealism. The main theme of Le Peu de Sargent is the conflict between desire and longevity. The magic science represents the life force of its owner, which is exalted through every expression of will, especially when it is used to gain power. Cautiously ignoring the patrons who over him skins, the protagonist greatly surrounds himself with wealth only to find himself miserable and weak on the end of the story. The second story is Airborne by Joris Cars Heisman. In these functioning, virtually plotted novels, this isn't the principal character in this event, descendant of an old aristocratic family. He resolved to overcome chronic envy by the cultivation of increasingly refined and outer taste and sensation. To this end, he purchased an isolated villa and has it fitted out to his exit. But at the end, he falls ill and reluctantly idols to his doctor, urging to abandon his extensive and normal life. He is the last son of an aristocratic family. This isn't as Loades 19th century broaches society and tries to retreat into an idea artistic work of his own creation. The narrative is almost entirely a collective of the narrative. This isn't as aesthetic test, massing on literature, painting, and religion, hyper-aesthetic sensory experience.
Henry Barbu's 1873 until 1935 is best known for his novel The View Under Fire 1916, based on his experience during the First World War. But his most remarkable achievement is El Enfer Hell 1908, a highly focused study of voyeurism. El Enfer Hell 1908, the novel tells about a young man staying in a friend's hotel discovers a hole in the wall above his bed, through which he can see and hear the occupants of the next room. Before long, he has become obsessed with the study of hidden lives of his neighbors, and spent his every working hour at his peephole. Through it he witnessed the whole gamut of human activity: adversion, childbirth, first love, marriage, adultery, lesbianism, illness, religion, and death. He hears the voice of his fellow human beings whispering, screaming, pleading, arguing, exulting, and dying. He mused on the question of his own existence and that of the world. Only when the young man has probed every circle of the hell of human existence does he cast his metaphysical musings, pack his bags, and return to the masquerade of everyday life. To
Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 until 1980, is a French philosopher, novelist, best known as the leading exponent of existentialism. As a philosopher, Sartre followed the German idealists in assigning a central role to the opposition. This opposition provides the underlying theme for his first novel, Nausea, 1938. Its protagonist, Roquentin, is an author who endures voluntary exile in the French provincial town of Belief in order to pursue his researches into the life of the Marquis de Lorraine, an 18th century diplomat. Each of the principal characters starts out with the belief that the objective world is just projection of his or her own consciousness, that it has no more structure that he or she inputs to it, but it is the end forced to abandon that belief. Nausea is philosophy incarnate, a novel in which the ultimate philosophical problem, the problem of existence, plays role as important that of any of its human characters. Sartre described himself as a representative of what he called atheistic existentialism, whose essential principle is that, in the absence of God, human beings are just what they make of themselves.
Albert Camus, 1913 until 1960. Camus was born on November 7, 1930 in Mondafil, France, Algeria. His Pignoir family had little money. Camus' father died in combat during World War I, after which Camus lived with his mother, who was partly deaf, in a low-income section of Algiers. Camus did well in school and was admitted to the University of Algiers, where he studied philosophy and played goalie for the soccer team. He quit the team following a bout of tuberculosis in 1930, thereafter focusing on academic study. By 1936, he had obtained undergraduate and graduate degrees in philosophy. The underlying theme of much of the work of Albert Camus is the problem of human responsibility in a universe devoid of human values. This problem is explored with compelling lucidity in his first novel, Le Trench, or The Outsider, in 1942. This novel tells about Marcel, a young man employed as a clerk in Algiers, lives the life typical of a middle-class bachelor, cooking his evening meal for himself in his small apartment, spending weekend with his girlfriend, going to the movies, lying on the beach. He would seem to be the epitome of ordinariness, except for one curious trait of character. He apparently lacks the basic emotion and reaction, hyperarousal included, which society requires of him. He observed the fact of life and that objectively from the outside. Marcel has seen that for him and so for everybody else, there is nothing beyond the experience of having lived. One is born, one lives one's life, and one dies. That is all. Camus is sometimes described as an existentialist, but he is only connected with that movement through his early friendship with the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, and through the adoption by the existentialists of Camus' early use of the term absurd to describe those facets of human existence which defy reason. In The Myth of Sisyphus, 1942, Camus poses the ultimate question in respect of this nation, namely sensing the absurdity of human existence and unable to come to terms with the universe. Right from the start, Camus proclaimed that the absurd must be regarded not as an end but as a point of departure. His thinking strongly influenced by his experience in the French resistance during the Second World War came to be shaped by his rejection of nihilism and his affirmation of moral coherence, from the loss of which he claimed the sense of the absurd actually arises. This rejection and affirmation is transformed into a human stoicism in his novel The Plague, 1947, in which the human predicament is presented against the backdrop of an epidemic in the Algerian city of Oran during the German occupation of France. The plague itself betokens not only the underlying irrationality of life but also the oppression suffered by the French people under the German occupation. Camus wrote the fall during a time of disillusionment with left-wing political thought in post-war France. Clement's career was intended as a satire on what Camus saw as the self-indicated political impotence of the left-leaning radicals of his day, in tracing how Clement's good feelings had led to his delicate in tyranny. Camus was actually pillaring those left-wing intellectuals, Sartre in particular, who, as a matter of their bourgeois origin, had caused them to embrace in an act of self-expiation the totalitarian politics of
George Perec, 1936 until 1982. Born on 7 March 1936, Paris, France. Died on 3 March 1982 in Ivry, France. French writer, often he called the great innovator of form of his generation. Perec was orphaned at an early age. His father was killed in action in World War II, and his mother died in a concentration camp. He was reared by an uncle and eventually attended on the Sorbonne for several years. Book by George Perec is La Vie Mode d'Emploi. 1978, Life a User Manual. This novel takes the form of a colossal jigsaw of more than 100 interwoven stories concerning the occupants of a Paris apartment building itself, reputedly suggested by a Saul Steinberg drawing of a New York apartment house stripped of its facade. The novel jigsaw structure pivots on the action of one of its characters, Percival Bartlebooth, an eccentric English millionaire bent on subjecting his life to strict artistic and formal control.
That's all for us. Thank you for your attention. Please forgive me if there is any mistakes in our material. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.